What's up, everybody? Thanks for clicking this video. Thanks for tuning into my channel. My name is Simon Hill, Black American from Louisiana, coming to you live from Budapest, Hungary. Today is March 6th, 2026, about 6:40 p.m. where I'm at right now. And we are finishing our documentary reviewing of Adam Curtis's Can't Get You Out of My Head. We're on episode 6, I believe, of this documentary series, and this is the final episode. It's titled Are We Pigeon or Are We Dancer? I have no idea what this means, but I'm looking forward to completing this. This is a longer episode than usual. It's a 2-hour documentary. Every other episode so far have been an hour and 11 minutes. This one is definitely the longest by far. So I don't know if we'll be able to finish everything. I don't know if we're going to be able to finish everything because I do have work that I have to get to in about 2.5 hours or so. So I'm going to try to finish all of this. If not, we'll break it up by the hour. So we'll do 1 hour, one half, and then another hour, the other half, and then maybe call it a day. Same thing that we did for the previous episodes. We will pause every 10 minutes to review what was on screen, and I'll give my commentary. Yeah, I might not be in the best mood because I had a kind of a shitty day. I went to school and my teacher called me the hard R, essentially. That's the long story short of it. My teacher wanted to call me the hard R and have everybody else in class call me the hard R as well. So we had to straighten that out. And we're going to try to form like the anti-racist Black Student Union here at my university, here in Budapest, Hungary. So be on the lookout for that. We're going to actually try to stop this rampant anti-Black racism that seems to happen on campus here in Budapest, Hungary. Because if it's happening to me, it's happening to somebody else, and it's probably happening much worse to somebody else than it is to me when I consider my, proficiency in English and my background and my, passport privilege, etc. like that. I'm sure many African students are facing discrimination from their peers and also from their teachers and not having any sort of recourse. But we want to change that at the university I study at here in Budapest. So we're going to be working on that. But until then, we're just chilling. We're just going to chill on live. This is a call-in show. So anybody who has anything they want to say to me, say it with your chest, say it with your full heart out there. Come on to the live, click the Zoom link, and you can have direct access to me. You will be on live for all the world to hear whatever it is you have to say and whatever is on your mind. The question I have for the people, I guess, today is when it comes to reading text with the N-word in mixed race company, meaning it's not just all Black people or all white people, should that be something that we do not do? Or should that be something that we should do? Is it dependent upon the circumstance and context? Or is it sort of a blanket ban? How do we feel about reading the N-word in like Tom Sawyer or, the Richard... Langston Hughes' work or something like that, Richard Wright's work, etc. like that. Like, how do we grapple with that? How do we grapple with the N-word, reading it aloud in text? What do you think? Anyway, let me know what you think in the comments. Also, holla at me in the live section. The link is open for anybody who wants to join, and looking forward to getting to it. Let's go.
In America in the 1950s, there was a famous exhibition called The Family of Man. It put forward a new way of seeing the world as an alternative to the horrors of Nazism and communism. It showed hundreds of photographs of individuals from all around the world. The message was simple: we are all one world. And at the center of that world is the individual self. The man who helped design it was a refugee from Germany called Herbert Bayer. He saw it as a new kind of propaganda. Instead of being overwhelmed by dramatic stories created by those in power, the individual would make their own story out of the photographs. Bayer made a diagram to show his idea. At the centre is the giant eye of the individual self, surrounded by a mass of images. It was a utopian vision of the self, selecting and arranging the fragments of images into their own story, and so becoming strong enough to withstand tyranny. Confident individuals in control of their occur was part of the age of the individual. He believed deeply in the idea of self-expression, but he was also one of the few in the 1980s who still believed in the power of grand stories to move people and to inspire them to change the world. His mother, Afeni, had been a Black Panther, and she still believed in the idea of revolution in America. Tupac later said, "The phrase Black Power had been like a lullaby when I was a kid. My mother, she would tell me these stories of things she did or saw, and it made me feel part of something. She always raised me to think I was the Black Prince of the revolution." What Afeni taught him was that the world most Americans lived in, both white and black, was an unreal fairyland that concealed the harsh reality of the power that controlled their lives.
We're not being taught to deal with the world as it is. We're being taught to deal with this fairyland, which we're not even living in anymore. It's sad, because I'm telling you, and it should not be me telling you. It should be common knowledge. Aren't they wondering why death rates are going up and suicide is going up and drug abuse? Aren't they wondering? Don't they understand that more people are, more kids are being handed crack than they're being handed diplomas? It's like, you know those little things they have for the mice where they go through around a circle and there's little blocks for it and everything? Well, society is like that. They'll let you go as far as you want. But as soon as you start asking too many questions and you're ready to change, boom.
By the 1980s, it was clear that the promises of the civil rights movement had not been kept in America, and the idealism of black politics fell away, and the communities divided into gangs that then turned on each other.
The shooting started about, 76 on Melvin. In 76. They stopped fighting, they just started shooting. And it was something new to me. We used to fight all the time. And the next minute, I'm running from gunshots. So the only thing I said to myself, we're going to start doing what they doing. Same thing they do to us, we do to them. Do or die, stay in the house. Fight or stay in the house. So I wasn't going to stay in the house for nobody.
Then crack swept through the black communities in America, and Afeni Shakur finally gave up. She became addicted to crack, and Tupac found himself alone. At the end of the 1980s, he moved to California. It was supposed to be one of the most integrated parts of the country. But one night, Tupac went to a party, and he realized that white racism was re-emerging even there.
There was a fight at the party, and I was like, what happened? He said the skinheads came and called the black people niggas and made them, they said they had to leave, and of course there was fight. I was like, oh my God. So we were sitting there, they went home, we were sitting there talking and everything, and my friends was just like, this couldn't happen in the 60s, let's figure out what to do. And you said, I know, we'll start the Black Panthers again. So we started the Black Panthers, but we're doing it more to fit our views, less violent and more silent, more knowledge.
Up and threw him in the trash. He tried to sell crack but ended up getting robbed. So she sees sex as a way of leaving heaven. So she really can't complain. Prostitute, fam, slang. And Brenda's her name. She's got a baby.
But there was another country that was also like a fairy tale land. Saudi Arabia. Ever since the 1970s, billions of dollars had flooded in from the West. This vast wave of money had created a dreamlike society, run by an elite, where no one paid any tax. But there were those in Saudi Arabia who saw another, much more sinister reality underneath this facade. Abu Zubaydah had been born in Saudi Arabia, but he was not a Saudi. His family were Palestinian, and he quickly discovered that if you were not a part of the Saudi elite, you were nothing. He and his family were looked down on and scorned. In the 1980s, Zubaydah grew more and more angry and lonely. He began to write a special diary into which he poured out his feelings. It was special because it was written to be read by just one person in the future, himself in the year 2000. The diary is full of a growing fury about how Saudi Arabia had been taken over and corrupted by the vast wealth that had come into the society. He describes how everyone around him, including his friends, were false and treacherous. They pretend to be pious, but really they have no values. The money has created a society where nobody believes in anything, and nothing can be trusted. Zubaydah tried to lose himself in music. The singer he loved most was Chris de Burgh, and his songs like The Lady in Red. But then, at the end of the 1980s, Zubaydah discovered the ideas of jihad. At that point, modern Islamism was sweeping through the Arab world. The attraction of jihad was that by losing yourself in the struggle, you could free yourself from the emptiness and the nihilism that the Western money was bringing into societies like Saudi Arabia. Abu Zubaydah travelled to the town of Peshawar on the Afghan border to lose himself in the new revolutionary struggle that was going to remake the Arab world and him.
I've never seen you looking so lovely as you did tonight. I've never seen you shine so bright. I've never seen so many men ask you if you wanted to dance. They're looking for a little romance, given half a chance. I have never seen that dress you're wearing, or the highlights in your hair that catch your eyes. I have been blind, the lady in red. It was dancing.
All right, so we're going to pause right here at the 10-minute mark. Interesting how, he's trying to tie in this neoliberal, individual, new world order that comes in the, mid-'80s to the 90s, of course, in the post-Soviet era. And he starts tying it in with the character of Tupac. He brings up, my favorite rapper, a person that I feel like I'm adequately or more than average knowledgeable about, Jada. In that, famous video when him and Jada Pinkett Smith are like kids and they're making one of those mall videos where they're playing a song. I don't think they were dancing to Will Smith's Parents Just Can't Understand, or Parents Just Don't Understand. But if they were, that's like double irony. Like, so ironic that Jada is dancing to the song of her future husband with the man that she really loves deep down inside. That's funny. That's just irony on irony, right? But another thing, I thought it's so interesting how Pac was like raised by Afeni and told that he was going to be like the future of the Black Panthers, the savior of the race, the Black Messiah. And in some ways, Pac's legacy will always be with us just because of that one quote. I might not change the world, but I guarantee you I'll spark the brain of the person that will. You know what I mean? And that's one of the most powerful quotes. And as I'm living here in Budapest, Hungary, nearly every day I see an image of Tupac somewhere on a T-shirt, on the bumper sticker of somebody's car. You know what I mean? Graffiti on the wall, his name somewhere. You know what I'm saying? So it's amazing how his legacy as a revolutionary, as an icon, as a radical, as a face for discontent has become so prolific around the world. And as he got to the part about Abu Zubaydah, I guess he's going to be like one of the people that flies themselves into the Twin Towers on 9/11. He said his favorite artist was Chris de Burgh. And I was like, is that the same Chris de Burgh that sings the song, Old-Fashioned People, They Never Know Why? The world is changing day to day. Move so fast it leaves them in and out of time. I love that song. That's one of my favorite songs. So, damn, I didn't know Abu Zubaydah had good taste in music. Anyway, very interested to see where it goes. That's all I had to say for the first 10 minutes. Let's go to the next 10 minutes right here.
Both Abu Zubaydah and Tupac Shakur, in their different ways, were part of something that had begun 200 years before with the French Revolution. It was the idea that through revolution, you could break through to a new kind of world, something beyond the corrupt reality of this one. But at this same moment, a completely new way of seeing the world was rising up in America. It said that all attempts to change the world through revolution would always fail, because the world was too complicated for anyone to be able to predict the consequences of their actions. It came from engineers and scientists who were using computers to model the way the world behaved.
Because it took the motor simulation and the voice motor isn't accurate, it will not match this data in time. The simulation will determine how long it took the signal.
They saw the world as a series of complex systems. When the scientists did this, the computers began to reveal something they hadn't expected. One tiny change in their equations could have massive, catastrophic consequences, which they could never have predicted. It was called chaos theory.
We're beginning to learn that very simple laws, very simple equations, can generate astonishingly complicated dynamical behavior, apparently random behavior, which we call chaos. So the bad news is we can have nothing random in the system, everything is known, and yet we cannot make long-term predictions about the future because the fluttering of a butterfly's wing will disturb the initial conditions.
Chaos theory had a very powerful influence in the West, because it rose up at the very moment the Soviet Union was collapsing. And it seemed to explain why all attempts at revolution had led to disaster. The world was just too complex for human beings to change in a predictable way. But in the 1990s, as the computers became more powerful, the scientists argued that even though human beings would never be able to understand the complexity, the computers could be used to see hidden underlying patterns and make the chaos manageable. This new idea was called complexity theory. One of its main promoters was the man who had discovered the elementary particles of all matter, quarks. He was called Murray Gell-Mann, and he believed that there were underlying patterns at every level of the universe, not just in the particles, but in the way people think, in the structure of human societies, and even in the languages they spoke.
You're always looking for patterns in nature.
Yes.
Well, what's
Patterns in the way people think. Patterns in the elementary particles. It's all part of the same way of doing things, I suppose. Trying to spot the law, trying to spot the relationship, the customs of primitive people, languages and the relations among them. And it's fascinating to try to figure out what these laws are.
As complexity theory spread, it seemed to offer a new way of managing societies by using computers to analyze vast amounts of data. That would bypass the failed political ideas that had always led to disaster in the past. But it brought with it a deeply conservative idea that was going to be the foundation of today's computer-dominated world. It said that what you are looking for in the data are the underlying laws that govern the systems as they already exist. You never ask why those systems came to exist, and who benefits from them existing. One of the leading complexity scientists insisted that the meaning of any system was irrelevant. I don't understand what meaning is, he said. In science, there is no meaning to anything. It doesn't ask the atom why it is going left when it is subjected to a magnetic field. It just observes and describes.
A man's man gun. A man that go kill with this is really mad. It will kill. This
You better watch out.
is an M1 carbine, 32 rounds. I can go tab Lewis Park with this. I can kill about 32 people if I hit them all. Guns. All about shooting, taking them out.
Yes.
And when they come shoot us, we go back and shoot them.
As he became more successful, Tupac Shakur dramatized in his music what he called the thug life. His aim, he said, was not to try and stop the violence, but to make those in the gangs who were killing each other realize that they could turn the violence outwards instead and fight back against those who really oppressed them. But Shakur had begun to suspect that maybe many people didn't really want change, that they were happy living in their own fairy tale world of gangs and violence.
Now, if we do want to live a thug life and a gangster life and all of that, okay, so stop being cowards and let's have a revolution. But we don't want to do that. Dudes just want to live a character. They want to be cartoons. But if they really wanted to do something, they was that tough. All right, let's start our own country. Let's start a revolution. Let's get out of here. Let's do something. But they don't want to do that.
In response, Shakur was accused by a number of the gangs of simply using them, that he was sucking out details of their lives and then acting it out in his music to make himself rich, that he wasn't real. In response, Tupac tried to become more and more part. Radicals accused him of getting lost in the character he had created. But really, he was reinforcing and intensifying the violence, not changing it. One radical wrote, "Thug ambition is completely predatory, because it is driven by an individualism that deliberately avoids the fellow feeling and the group solidarity needed by revolutionaries." In 1994, Shakur was sent to jail for 5 months for raping a 17-year-old girl. Shakur found himself in the new world of mass incarceration in America. Driven by fears of a wave of violent crime, President Clinton had brought in tough new crime laws, even though in reality, crime was falling. Hundreds of thousands of young black men were now imprisoned with no hope of parole, even for minor offences. It seemed to show that President Clinton cared more about the fears of the white middle-class voters than he did about the lives of young black men. While the white radicals, who were buying Tupac Shakur's music, did nothing to challenge it. By moving radical politics into the world of culture, Tupac Shakur had also become part of the fairy tale world, because he helped keep the anger and the dissent sealed off from the real world of politics and power. And now, he was all alone.
Trust nobody. Trust nobody.
Half the dog.
You know what I mean? Straight up. My closest friends did me in. My closest friends, my homies, people who I done took care of their whole family. I done took care of everything for them, looked out for them, put them in the game, everything. Turned on me. Fear is stronger than love. Remember that. Fear is stronger than love. All the love I gave didn't mean nothing when it came to fear. So it's all good. But I'm a soldier. I always survive. I constantly come back. You know what I mean? Only thing that can kill me is death. That's the only thing that ever stopped me is death.
One night, at the end of...
All right, we're going to pick up right here at the 20-minute mark of episode 6. The part where he starts talking about chaos theory. After the fall of the Soviet Union, these programmers, computer tech guys start thinking that, you know, the world is so unpredictable, all the best you can do is try to manage systems rather than change systems. And I find this to be a very interesting worldview. And it seems to be a worldview that actually is more prevalent than you think about. Though we live in a world of constant chaos by people who think they're managing this system, i.e. the United States government, the current regime we have right now being a prime example. But the idea that who cares about how a system came into place, whether this system is just or unjust, the only thing we can do is try to manage the unpredictability of this system the best we can. Very interesting way of looking at life, though I totally disagree with it. We should try to change unjust systems to make them more just, first and foremost. Second thing, he starts making the point that Pac is also sort of buying into chaos theory, because that's how this documentary works. They put two ideas close together and there is an associative link built between them. He's saying that because chaos theory said you can't control systems, you can only try to manage them, or you can't change systems, right? Pac is saying with the thug life, the idea that we just need to be gangsters and hardcore, like we can't actually change this system that's turned black people into beasts, thugs, criminals, gangsters. We just have to fully embrace this and then try to manage this type of lifestyle, which is why it's called thug life, right? It's a part of this lifestyle we now created. And Adam Curtis is making the argument here that Pac essentially was a fake gangster. He was pretending to be something he was not. This is a contention that some people have with Pac's life. I am somewhat more nuanced than that. I don't think Pac was being fully fake as a gangster, whatever. And I don't also believe Pac was being like fully real. I believe Pac was being, I do believe Pac was maybe a high functioning like autistic person or somebody with some sort of mental illness. And this is me diagnosing him without me being a psychologist at all. But I do believe, with Pac doing things like shooting those two cops in Atlanta in the ass, you know what I mean? When he sees that they were beating up on an unarmed black man, you know what I mean? Pac doing whatever he can to like speak out against police brutality, even saying like straight up we should start shooting at police. You know what I mean? That's a lot of Pac's early music, saying we should straight up shoot police, and him saying in this documentary we need to have a revolution instead of being thugs and criminals. You know what I'm saying? Like, I do believe that Pac was more revolutionary than he was gangster, but he also saw the gangster lifestyle as a vehicle to transmit revolutionary messages, or also as just a continuation of the gangster shit that the boys in the 60s and 70s were doing. Because we just read Huey's book, and Huey was doing nothing but gangster shit, saying I was outside all day squabbling up with everybody and packing pistols. You get what I'm saying? So maybe Pac, like, because his mom was a Panther, he knew that the Panthers really were just street guys who also read Marx. You get what I'm saying? So maybe that's also how Pac saw himself as well. You know, Huey wouldn't be some like nerdy backpack rapper if Huey were alive. Huey would have been, you know, Ice Cube. You get what I'm saying? Shout out to Zina Ahmed 7733 up in the chat. Shout out to Zina Ahmed up in the chat. Yeah, I find this the part about Tupac to be interesting, how he's covering him. Pac was not sentenced to Clinton Correctional Facility in 1994 because he raped a 17-year-old girl. He was accused of sexual touching or sexual battery, which is not rape, right? Even his accuser has said that Pac did not forcibly enter her. She willingly had sex with Tupac. The accuser of Tupac said that Pac let other men have sex with her without her consent. He had sex with her willingly, right? And then he left the room and let his boys assault her. And then Pac was the one who went down for that case. You get what I'm saying? So it's kind of a misnomer to say it was rape. Zina Ahmed said, thank you. You're welcome. You're welcome, and you're welcome to stay. This is a live call-in show. Everybody is welcome to join. So if you want to talk to me directly, just click the Zoom link and you can join in the live stream. Until then, we're going to be continuing with episode 6 of Can't Get You Out of My Head. We're going to watch the next 10 minutes. Okay? Zina Ahmed says, can you please not say anything about adult things? I'm 11 years old. I'm sorry, Zina, this is not for you. I might have to put you in timeout. This is not meant for children. Do not come around here, Zina. This is not meant for children. I say explicitly on my channel, every video is not meant for kids. Because on my channel, I talk about all types of stuff. So you probably need to go away, Zina. Go away. Do not come on this channel. Anyway, continuing here, we're going to continue with the next 10 minutes of Can't Get You Out of My Head. And then we're going to be reacting to that. Let's go.
Of 1991, Abu Zubaydah was part of a group of jihadists attacking the city of Gardez in Afghanistan. They were trying to overthrow the communist regime left behind by the Russians 3 years before. But then suddenly, a mortar exploded next to Abu Zubaydah, and a piece of shrapnel pierced his skull. It went into his brain, and his whole way of seeing and understanding the world suddenly changed. The next day, he was taken back from the front line, over the mountains to Peshawar. For 2 months, he was unconscious. Then his memories from the past began to come back, but in a mass of fragments. Nothing linked them. They made no sense. So Zubaydah began to use his diary to write down all the flashes of memory, to try and make sense of who he was. In the end, it would run to over 1,000 pages, a vast collage of memories and feelings, moments of intense loneliness as a child, of watching Pluto meet an angel in a Disney cartoon, moments of fear in combat, the smell of perfume, the anger he felt at friends, moments of sexual desire, and the sensation of autumn coming on. When he had physically recovered, Abu Zubaydah went back to the jihad training camps in Afghanistan, but he found that whatever he did, he could not put his memories back together. They remained just fragments in his brain. He also had a growing sense that the whole organisation of jihad was disintegrating into rival factions. All ideas of solidarity and collective action had gone. In the diary, he describes how you couldn't trust anyone any longer. Zubaydah knew bin Laden, who was running another jihad camp. Bin Laden asked him to make an alliance, but Zubaydah refused. He was aware that Bin Laden was planning some kind of retaliation against the Americans, but he didn't trust him. Zubaydah spent his time making explosives and watching American movies like Rambo 3. Zubaydah wrote in his diary how up in the mountains everything was falling apart. The revolutionary dream of Islamism was failing. Or his sense of who he was, his identity, had disintegrated into random memories. They meant nothing. There was no story that made sense. He wrote how it was as though time had stopped. He was trapped in a perpetual now, haunted by fragments of memory, with no way of moving forward into the future. But in the West, scientists were beginning to ask whether the very idea of an integrated self was actually a fiction for everyone. In the 1980s, the new group of behavioural psychologists had argued that what human beings think of as their self was not fully in control of their actions. Now, they had been joined by neuroscientists who said they had discovered something even stranger. That inside their brains, human beings had all kinds of different selves, which the conscious mind had no awareness of at all. They were led by Michael Gazzaniga, who would win a Nobel Prize for his work.
With your right hand, you point to this row, and with your left hand, you point to this row. Okay?
Gazzaniga studied the brains of people like Vicky.
The Italian male gland.
She suffered from extreme epilepsy. To try and stop her attacks, surgeons had cut the nerve fibers that linked the two sides of her brain. It worked, but it also revealed something very strange. There was another force inside Vicky that emerged, that kept trying to take control.
I knew what I wanted to wear, and I would open up my closet, get ready to take it out. My other hand would just take control. And I would just reach in and get something that I wouldn't want at all. And a couple times I had a pair of shorts on, and then I find myself putting another pair of shorts on top of a pair I already had on, and which I knew was wrong.
Gazzaniga argued that really there were multiple selves inside the human brain, each one taking control at different moments. Normally that is hidden, because the one self that is conscious constantly makes up stories to explain what all the other selves are doing. But when the connection between the two parts of the brain is cut, it can't do that, and the other parts emerge. Vicky wasn't strange, Gazzaniga said. She just showed the truth. Gazzaniga argued that really all human beings live in a made-up dream world of stories, which give them the illusion that they are in control. When really, there is something else inside them that they will never contact.
We have to quit viewing man as a single psychological entity, that in fact his psychological self is a multiple self, that he has a variety of mental systems existing in his brain. They have emotions, they have memories, they have incentives, they have destinies, and they're able to control the motor apparatus, by which I mean they're able to make movements, they're able to actually precipitate behaviors on the part of someone. And once those actions are completed, here comes this verbal system in to give an explanation and to propose a theory to itself to explain why these actions were carried out.
The 1990s was the high point of the idea of individualism. With all the old revolutions gone, it promised the vision of a new world of free, confident people. But what was happening was that the sciences that had grown up with that individualism were now turning on it and eating away at it. Complexity theory said that human beings were just components in vast, complex systems that they would never be able to understand, which meant that what they thought and what they felt was irrelevant to the system. Our psychology, and now neuroscience, said that much of what went on inside people's brains was beyond their control, which meant that the conscious bit inside the brain, the part that applies meaning to the world, was actually irrelevant. Bit by bit, the idea of the world as something that human beings could understand and change was disappearing. Human consciousness was being sidelined. In 1996, Tupac Shakur was shot in Las Vegas. He was taken to hospital in a critical condition. 6 days later, he died. Still today, no one knows who shot him. The suspicion and the lack of trust that he had come to feel was now spreading through the black community. And in that mood, a new conspiracy theory was rising up. It said that the crack epidemic in black areas had been created by the CIA and the US government. And the feelings of suspicion and paranoia spread even further.
This show is about finding some truth. Was the CIA responsible for, in any way, shape, or form, funneling cocaine into the United States of America back in the early 80s, and then helped to develop and turn it into crack, which was then spread across America, and is the reason why most of our inner cities are in the plight that they're in.
So we're right between that house and this house. We're renting this half of a house. Alright, so this is our garage. Basically, nobody's in here, but we got ping pong table, computer.
But there was still a group of idealists at the heart of Silicon Valley who still believed that individuals could remake the world, and they could help them do it in a new way. It wouldn't confront the old systems of power. It would simply bypass them.
There's Larry, CEO of Google.
All right, so those are the next 10 minutes. Now we're at the 30-minute mark of episode 6 of Can't Get You Out of My Head. Let me go back. There's a lot here that was going on. He was talking about Abu Zubaydah, feeling like the Islamist groups he's a part of are fracturing. I'm interested to see where the Abu Zubaydah part goes. I feel like Abu Zubaydah is either one of the people that flew themselves into the towers, or he's one of those guys that we've kept like at a CIA black site for like the past 30 years. And like he's been tortured and harassed by the US government forever by now. I wonder where that's going to go. When they talk about psychology and how people deep down inside have like multiple selves inside of them, I don't know if I believe that. I don't know if that's exactly true. I read a whole book about psychology, as y'all saw a few months ago, and it left me even more confused. I disagree, though, with the contention that the conscious part of your brain is not even worth considering. It's pointless because if most of your brain or your consciousness is stuff that you can't control, then that means that the things that you actually consider, think about, believe in, don't matter. I find that to be highly dubious. I mean, I'm a materialist, but I do acknowledge that people are motivated by their religion, by their faith, by their culture, by their beliefs. Now, a lot of your faith, culture, and beliefs are influenced by your material conditions. And in fact, I would argue all of it is influenced by your material conditions. But people can still, have ideas that are not dictated solely, right? You know what I mean? If that makes sense. And yeah, shout out to Coffee Black 6138 up in the chat. Shout out to Coffee Black joining the conversation. As far as the Tupac stuff could go, hold on, wait. Was there more Pac stuff? Yeah, they started talking about Pac and how he got killed. Very sad and tragic. I thought Pac was going to be a much bigger part of this documentary, but we're already at the 30-minute mark and he's killed already. So yeah, very interested to see how that goes. And now we're at the part where Google is being invented and apparently the CIA put crack in the hood. Okay, don't know where we're going here. But yeah, I got no other comments. If you have anything you want to say to me, jump into the comment section. We'll holler at you and we will discuss it. Without further ado, let's continue with the 30-minute mark until the 40-minute mark of Can't Get You Out of My Head.
At the heart of Silicon Valley, he still believed that individuals could remake the world, and they could help them do it in a new way. It wouldn't confront the old systems of power. It would simply bypass them.
There's Larry, CEO of Google.
At Google, our mission is to make the world's information accessible and useful, and that means all of the world's information, which now in our index numbers over 1 billion documents. And it's an incredible resource. I mean, in history, you have never had access to just pretty much all the world's information in seconds, and we have that now. My hope is to provide instant access to any information anybody ever wants in the future. I think I want to make the world a better place.
The idealism behind Google was the same vision that had been behind the Family of Man exhibition 40 years before. It said that everyone could use the information to build their own story, free of the old elites who in the past had controlled what they read and what they saw. But it would also link them together. One world at the centre of which would be the individual self assembling the data in any way they wanted. But in Russia, that same dream was now seen to have led to disaster. At the start of the 1990s, a giant experiment had begun to transform the country into a free market democracy. But it had gone disastrously wrong. Russia had been taken over by a small group called the oligarchs, who had looted the country of much of its wealth. And the idea that Russia could become a society of free individuals was now seen as a joke. No one believed in communism or democracy any longer.
What does it mean? What does democracy mean then for most Russians, not in Moscow? But
unfortunately, word socialism has lost its meaning and its value in this country 10 years ago. After 10 years, democracy is a kind of a curse. You can curse, you can offend someone by naming him a Democrat. So this is the answer to your question.
Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
In 1999, the oligarchs decided to select Russia's next president, to make sure it was someone who would protect them. And they selected Vladimir Putin. He was an anonymous bureaucrat running the security service, and a man who believed in nothing. With their money and the media they controlled backing him, Putin was duly elected. The oligarchs believed that they were now safe, and their power would continue undisturbed. But then something unexpected happened. In August of 2000, the nuclear submarine Kursk set out on the first Navy exercise since the fall of the Soviet Union. As a torpedo was being loaded, it exploded, and the submarine sank to the ocean floor. To begin with, the Russian Navy didn't notice that anything had happened. Then they began to search for the Kursk, but they couldn't find it. The families of the crew came to the base at Murmansk. The officials assured them that they were in contact with the crew, but this was a lie. They knew that all 118 sailors were already dead. The families grew desperate.
Сколько это может продолжаться? Они за 50-70 долларов закрыты сейчас консервные банки у нас. Зачем я его растила? Скажите, у вас есть дети? А? У вас нет, наверное, детей? 150 лет. Это стыдно. Что не пойдет? Что не пойдет? Ничего не понимаю. Они зажравшись, там все сидят. А у нас ничего нет. Ничего, ни условий для жизни, ни для службы, ничего.
To begin with, Putin did nothing. He had no idea how to react. But finally, he was forced to come to Murmansk to confront the angry families in a closed meeting. What Putin then did, to save himself, was turn that anger away from himself and towards the very people who had put him in power. The people who killed your sons, he told the families, were the corrupt elites in Moscow. The oligarchs who have all the money and control all the media. They are the ones who are lying to you. They are the ones who have destroyed the army and the navy. They are the ones who have stolen everything and have everyone in their pocket. Faced by a catastrophe, what Putin had discovered was a new source of power. It was the raw anger of those outside the major cities in Russia who felt lonely and isolated as their jobs and lives had collapsed around them. They had been promised a democracy, but what they got was chaos and corruption on a vast scale. And Putin had realized the power that anger could give him. But he himself still believed in nothing. He had been taken and placed in power, and he had no goal. The Russian journalist Mikhail Zygar wrote, "There is no logic in the age of Putin. There is no plan or strategy. Everything that happens, like with the Kursk, is a tactical step, a real-time response to external stimuli, devoid of any ultimate objective." By the start of 2000, Silicon Valley had become the focus of a giant financial boom. Wall Street banks were pouring millions of dollars into small companies that they knew were unlikely to ever make any real profit. Their real aim was to create massive share price rises when they took the companies public on the stock exchange. But then the bubble suddenly burst. Companies that only weeks before had been valued at billions of dollars disappeared overnight. Their technology auctioned off in fire sales.
You have $100,000 computers with 8 processors and 10 hard drives and just decked out with gigs of RAM, and that stuff's going for 10 cents, 20 cents on the dollar.
Google managed to survive, but the crash meant that they met the power of money, which was going to reshape their aims completely. The venture capitalists who had invested in the company now had the upper hand. They told Sergey Brin that he had to find a way to make money, and quickly. And a sense of emergency gripped Google. But then they found the solution. Every time someone searched the web, they left trails behind them, traces as they traveled through the internet. Up to this point, that mass of data had simply been used to make the system of giving people information more efficient. But now, the company's engineers realized that if they gathered enough of it together, they could build up a picture of how every individual behaved, and how they were likely to behave in the future. It meant they could predict what advertisement an individual would click on and respond to, without having to ask them anything. Google started to tell advertisers that they had found a way of replacing the hit and miss of old advertising with a new scientific certainty. And very quickly, they began to make millions of dollars. But there was a problem. What Google were doing was gathering vast amounts of data on millions of people without them being fully aware of it. And by 2001, the Federal Trade Commission was preparing a law which would stop much of what they were doing. But then suddenly, many of those problems disappeared.
All right, we're going to stop here at the 40-minute mark of episode 6 of Can't Get You Out of My Head. One of the biggest tragedies, like Putin says, Putin rightly says, one of the biggest tragedies of the 20th century is the fall of the Soviet Union, right? And if you don't miss the Soviet Union, you have no heart. And if you want it back, you have no brain. And even as a communist, even as a Marxist, I agree with that, because the Soviet Union was not perfect. It was an attempt at building socialism, but it is not something that we should then abandon. We shouldn't say we shouldn't try to build socialism just because this socialist state fell. I really hate when people say communism doesn't work because, the white European communist countries fell apart. That's white supremacist thinking, in my opinion. Socialism is still being fought for by the people in Laos, by the people in Vietnam, by the people in China, by the people in Cuba, by various movements throughout Latin America, and also still within Europe and America and other parts of the Western developed first world. People are still fighting for socialism. So I really dislike when people say that, communism doesn't work because all the white people abandoned it in Europe. So tell the Vietnamese and the Chinese that what they're doing is not real communism, like when they're still trying to build socialism. But very interesting how they showed the images of like the robberies in Russia of these armed gangs that were holding up, these new millionaires and billionaires and stuff like that. And that white man had gold teeth. He had gold teeth. Did y'all see that? White man in a two-piece business suit. He had a stack. He had a band in his jacket pocket and gold teeth, gold fronts. That was hella gangster. All right. Shout out to Spider67 up in the chat. Shout out to Kamal up in the chat as well. We're doing a live call-in. So if you guys want to talk to me, jump into the live stream, hit the Zoom link, and you can say whatever you want to me as we continue to read. As we continue to watch Can't Get You Out of My Head. What other parts were interesting here? Yeah, I also find it a bit ironic that the Russian oligarchs are the one who put Putin into power. And since then, Putin has been making everybody get the bad case of falling out of a window. Like many millionaires and billionaires in Russia, they get sick. They get sick with this sick disease of falling out of windows. And next thing you know, they're done, So, yeah, that's all I got to say. Shout out to Spider67 up in the chat, showing a lot of love. Spider67, what do you think about Russia? What do you think about Putin? What do you think about our man in Moscow. What do you think about him? I want to know where Spider67 is at. And anybody else, if you got any comments, let me know. We're going to be watching the next 10 minutes and then giving our comments about it. We're already at the 40-minute mark. We're near the hour mark. Maybe we'll be able to finish this before my class. I'm not sure. Okay, I don't know. Spider67 says, I don't like that he is being mean to Ukraine. Okay, well, that's fair. That's a start. That's a start. I think he's a kid. You know, it's Spider67. It's okay. You're a kid. Okay. How do you think the war in Ukraine should end, Spider? How should it end? All right. And if any of you want to talk and chat it up, hit up the link. And we can do a discussion live for the people. Anyway, we're going to watch the next 10 minutes and then give our opinions about it. And yeah, let's go.
The attacks on September the 11th shocked America because no one had seen them coming. The phrase constantly used was, "We failed to join up the dots." And in the state of fear, the government passed the Patriot Act. It said that everyone's personal data must be open to examination to stop further attacks. Privacy of the individual now became irrelevant in the face of a much higher need, security. It meant that the very thing that Google had invented, looking for patterns in a mass of data, now became central to the security of the United States. And the threat of new laws to stop Google collecting as much data on people as they wanted faded away. The shock of the attacks of 9/11 began a shift away from the individualism that had been at the center of America since the 1950s. And Google was going to become central to that shift. Because rather than doing what they had originally dreamed of, giving people data so they could make their own stories, what Google were now doing was taking people's data and using it to predict what those individuals would do, without having to ask them anything. What they thought or felt as individuals, and the stories they told themselves, was completely irrelevant. Consciousness was being sidelined even more. When the coalition invaded Afghanistan, Abu Zubaydah had fled. He had not been involved in the attacks, but he knew that the Americans were arresting all the jihadists they could find. He travelled back over the mountains and hid in Faisalabad in Pakistan. But 2 months later, he was captured.
Within months of September the 11th, 2001, we captured a man named Abu Zubaydah. We believe that Zubaydah was a senior terrorist leader and a trusted associate of Osama bin Laden. Zubaydah was severely wounded during the firefight that brought him into custody. These are dangerous men with unparalleled knowledge about terrorist networks and their plans of new attacks.
Zubaydah was taken by the CIA to a secret prison they ran in Pakistan. He told them that he had had nothing to do with the attacks, but they didn't believe him. Then they read his diary that he had written to himself. And the CIA decided it meant that Zubaydah had a multiple personality, and that the other, hidden self, was hiding the information they desperately needed. So the CIA turned to psychology to unlock the information they knew was concealed inside his head.
Is this the new positive psychology class?
Yes, it is.
So what is this positive psychology stuff? Is the rest of the field negative?
Well, that's not really the case. Positive psychology is the study of the psychological aspects of what makes life worth living. It simply focuses on building the best in people as opposed to repairing the worst.
I see.
I need to get to my next class. Catch you later.
Thank you for helping me learn more about this fascinating field.
Positive psychology was part of the new psychology that had risen up in the 1990s. It said that millions of people were really far weaker than previously thought, that they were trapped in a state of what the psychologists called learned helplessness. And positive psychology would develop techniques to rescue these people. But psychologists working for the CIA decided they would turn the system in reverse. They would use it to reduce Abu Zubaydah back to a state of learned helplessness. They called it enhanced interrogation. And they did it by waterboarding Zubaydah 83 times, by repeatedly smashing him against the wall, and locking him naked in a freezing box for weeks at a time. The CIA videotaped the interrogations, but later destroyed the tapes. They reportedly show Abu Zubaydah screaming, shaking uncontrollably and vomiting. What was done to him became the model for a system of torture that the Americans then used across the War on Terror, including the prison at Abu Ghraib. Desperate for the torture to stop, Zubaydah just spewed out all the disconnected memories inside his brain, memories that even he had not been able to piece together. They were fragmented images of what might happen in America, many of them drawn from the films he had watched, including Godzilla. And that same sense of incoherent confusion was now unleashed on America. The CIA believed them, and the fragments, inside Abu Zubaydah's brain, now spread out across America to create yet another wave of fear. But there were more and more people who were beginning to realize that out in the margins of Western societies, there was a growing anger and a total disillusion with the system. Because it offered hundreds of thousands of people nothing and gave their lives no purpose or meaning.
I was brought up in a working class way, in a working class background. I was lucky, I was good at school, I was academically minded, I was quick, I could make people laugh, you know what I mean, I could do things, I could chat and still get on with my work. Most people couldn't do that. There were people genuinely who were fantastic with working with their hands, but the other 5 hours of the day, they were just miserable. It's just not set up to cater for working class lads who are that way inclined. There's just no end goal, there's no end point, there's no path. There's just get on with it is the main phrase that you hear constantly. And that messes with your mind after a while.
Dominic Cummings worked as a political advisor for the Conservative Party. But he believed that all politicians, left and right, had completely lost touch with the people they were supposed to represent. Cummings came from the northeast, and he had seen the disillusion and the anger that had been growing there ever since a wave of factory closures in the late 1990s. The Labour government had insisted that there was nothing they could do in the face of what was called globalism. But Cummings wanted to find a way to remake politics so it could challenge these new forms of unaccountable power. And the way to do that, he believed, was by using complexity theory. Cummings was fascinated by the founder of complexity theory, Murray Gell-Mann, because Cummings believed that Gell-Mann's ideas explained why politicians like Tony Blair had failed to stand up against the force of globalization. The systems of power, like international finance, were now so complex that politicians could never predict what effect their policies would have. So they had stopped trying to control them and simply let them rip. But complexity theory, he believed, would allow you to understand and control these new forces. Because if you looked at the world as a series of complex systems, you would find that there were underlying patterns.
It's a very simple point, but very important when I think about sheer complexity. If you look around at social networks, physical networks, mental networks, they consist of complicated, non-linear, and independent systems. In these networks, properties emerge from the interaction of lots of different agents. You can't tell what's going to happen just by looking at a single agent. So, for example, if you look at ant colonies, you have lots of interacting ants, and from this you have emergent behaviors like farming, slavery, and war that you can never predict from a single ant. The extreme complexity means that prediction is extremely difficult, even over tiny timescales. It means the scale of complexity means you can't have centralized control. There's no master ant, there's no master neuron, there's no master immune cell.
Okay, we're going to stop right there. And it's very interesting that, the leaders of finance are partnering with Google, and Google is influenced by this idea of complexity theory because it relates to what we read a few days ago from Mark Fisher's book, Capitalist Realism, how capitalism has become this sort of amorphous, non-central thing that you can't point to and say, that's where the exploitation is coming from, that's where the wrongdoing is coming from, that's the nexus point. Like now it's so diffuse, now it's so just nebulous, watery, that you can't hold it in your hands and say, this is what it is. It's all over the place. And that's sort of very interesting how that's similar to what complexity theory is positing. It's positing that this world is so diverse and different and spread out that it's impossible to say that there is one core thing that we could do to change it and make it better, right? It's very interesting how the critique of capitalism says this is true, and the people that do not even identify themselves as capitalist or neoliberal say this is true as well. So, and Nelson says in the comments, they're always trying to design systems to contain and design, and I guess also control as well. And that's what I'm getting from this. That's what I'm getting from this text right here. It's very interesting and captivating how they're putting all this together. When it comes to this complexity theory, it seems to be not really based on anything other than an idea that they want to say is the new way this world works. We're past ideology. We're at the end of history. There is no real hardcore capitalist or hardcore communist or fascist. There are only people that want to manage and maintain and stitch together this system that there is no alternative to. So there's that. What else was interesting about this text? Oh, sorry, I skipped ahead. We're at the 50-minute mark. I skipped ahead. But the part about Abu Zubaydah, so they capture Abu Zubaydah in Pakistan or Afghanistan or whatever. He was fighting with the Taliban, and they say that this guy who had brain damage after getting hit in the head with shrapnel, he is supposedly bipolar, or he has multiple personalities, because they open up his book and they say that he's writing all these weird sort of fever dream type sentences in his diary. So therefore, the way that we can find out that this guy is a terrorist is by trying to get his terrorist self out of him. Because he has multiple personalities. Maybe Abu Zubaydah on Tuesday is a good guy, but Abu Zubaydah on Thursday is the terrorist. So we gotta, attach electric shocks to his testicles to bring out the Abu Zubaydah on Thursday from Monday interrogation. So very interesting. I knew Abu Zubaydah's name sounded super familiar because I grew up hearing that name. You know what I'm saying? I'm coming home from school, in 2003, 4, 5, whatever. I turn on the news and I'm eating cereal for lunch. I'm eating cereal for lunch, and they say, yeah, we done captured Abu Zubaydah, the world's most wanted terrorist that you never heard of. And stuff like that. So yeah, very interesting. The worst ideas come from psychologists. I'm sorry. It's a fact. These psychologists working for the U.S. government said, what's an effective way to get the truth out of people? Nipple twisting. Nipple twisting until it turns pink and blue is the way that you can find out the truth. Just grab the nipples and twist. That's the way you find out the truth. Okay. Yeah. Anything else? I don't have anything else to say, really. But we're going to continue watching. We're about to hit the 60-minute mark. We might call it a day. We might pause right here because I got class in an hour, and I might want to lay down and rest and chill. So we might stop at 8 o'clock and then maybe come back later, or we might just do it tomorrow. I'm not exactly sure. Depends on how y'all act in the chat. If y'all got interesting comments or anything you want to say, we might spend more time online. But other than that, we might just stop after these next 10 minutes, okay? So without further ado, let's get into it. The next 10 minutes of Can't Get You Out of My Head, episode 6.
Agent. So for example, if you look at ant colonies, you have lots of interacting ants, and from this you have emergent behaviors like farming, slavery, and war that you can never predict from a single ant. The extreme complexity means that prediction is extremely difficult, even over tiny timescales. It means the scale of complexity means you can't have centralized control. There's no master ant, there's no master neuron, there's no master immune cell.
Cummings wanted to use data and computers to see the underlying patterns in modern society, and then use that knowledge to take power back from the unelected elites who had seized control. But to do that, he was going to have to find a way to harness the anger and the disenchantment that was growing in the country. But Cummings was not alone. Across the world, there was a growing feeling that politics had completely lost touch with the people, and was therefore losing its power to hold society together. In China, the children of those who had led the Cultural Revolution were now in power. They were called the Princelings.
We are very happy to invite the newly elected members of the Standing Committee of the Political Bureau of the 17th Central...
On the surface, the China they ruled over was a powerful country. It had a rich and rapidly growing middle class.
What the hell? What's happened?
And China was also pouring money into a rapidly growing military force. But what had been buried and forgotten was any guiding ideology, any confident story about what this was all for. Instead, money had filled the void. And that now seemed to be dissolving the bonds that held society together. There was an extraordinary wave of organised crime sweeping through Chinese cities. Vast amounts of government money was being stolen and smuggled abroad. But at the centre of the corruption was land and property. On the edge of the new giant cities, organised gangs were forcing farmers out of their houses at gunpoint and seizing their land.
What's happening is quite literally a massive land grab. Those with political power or money and political connections are doing everything they can to take control of land. And the reason is very simple. Today in China, land is extremely valuable. It's in demand for all sorts of things. For housing developments like this one, for factories, for shopping malls. Making money was never easier.
What made the corruption so widespread was that under communism, no one was allowed to own land. All the land was owned by the party, which meant that hundreds of thousands of party officials were being bombarded by bribes and threats from organised crime, wanting to get the land. And corruption spread on an extraordinary scale. The government's chief advisor, Wang Huning, called it ultra-corruption. He said it was so extensive that it was hollowing out the whole political system of control. The country, he said, risked fragmenting into the anarchy of the 1920s, when hundreds of separate areas were controlled by rival warlords. But one man decided he was going to make a stand against this. He was called Bo Xilai. He was at the heart of the Chinese elite. Bo's father had been one of the leaders of the revolution with Mao Zedong. But in the Cultural Revolution, Mao had turned on Bo's father, and he was brutally beaten. And Bo's mother was killed mysteriously. Bo himself had been a Red Guard, but was sent to a labour camp for 5 years. But Bo now announced that he was going to bring back the dreams from that time. In 2007, Bo was made the head of the city of Chongqing. Chongqing was one of the biggest cities in the world. It had a population of 32 million people. And Bo decided to use the city as a laboratory for a giant experiment. He started to hold mass rallies in the city, which were broadcast live on television, and red songs from the Mao era were sung by thousands. Bo said that the reason for the corruption in China was because there was no shared vision of the future, no aim or purpose other than money. And he was going to reawaken the idealism of the past. And he also passed sweeping laws to try and tackle the growing inequalities, subsidising housing and education. And Bo brought in a new police chief, whose job was to root out the gangsters who had corrupted every part of the city government and were still demolishing thousands of people's houses. Bo soon became famous, and he was seen as a future leader. He and his wife, a lawyer called Gu Kailai, became a glamorous couple. They, like many others of the Chinese elite, had a fascination for old England. Many of the estates being built for the new rich in China's cities were designed to look like an imaginary version of England's past.
说我们这个会所就叫英伦会所，对，也是英式的英伦会所，一共8000平方米。
Bo and Gu decided to send their son to an English public school, Harrow. And it led them to meet an Englishman who had come to China called Neil Haywood. He had also been to Harrow, and he helped their son. And he soon became close to the family. Haywood also lived in the old dreams of England, from a time when it was powerful. He dropped hints that he worked for MI6, and he drove around Beijing in an Aston Martin with the number plate 007. Haywood used his friendship with the family to make a property deal in Chongqing. But then, for some reason, the deal went wrong, and Haywood blamed Gu Kailai. At the same time, rumours started to come from the centre in Beijing that what Bourgeois was doing in Chongqing might not be as idealistic as it seemed. And in Russia, there were those who were also trying to attack and expose the emptiness and the corruption that had taken over the society there. In 2007, members of the small National Bolshevik Party that was led by Edward Limonov burst into the finance ministry in Moscow. They wanted to make people realise the corruption of Russia hadn't gone away. It was now spreading even deeper into the society, and that Putin had to go. They were arrested, and 39 of them were put on trial together in a giant cage.
I believe we are the most effective organization of Russia who irritates the government, but very effective that clumsy police state cannot struggle against us. 39 young people behind bars more than 6 months. What they said we want Putin to go out.
Putin's other main opponent was the journalist Anna Politkovskaya. What Putin had done, she said, was simply take the vast corruption that had begun with the oligarchs and shift it into the public sector. So the civil servants, the managers, and the intelligence agents around Putin all now benefited.
All right, so we're going to stop right there at the 60-minute mark of Can't Get You Out of My Head. There's a lot that was going on in that past 10 minutes. Okay, so they started talking about this guy named Bo, who was like a left communist in China, who wanted to root out corruption. I heard about him actually very recently because as I've become more educated and more interested, I guess, in socialism and Marxist thought and current Marxist trends and movements and stuff like that, I've been getting a lot of video recommendations about everything that's happening in China or everything that has been happening in post-Soviet China. And this guy, Bo, you know what I mean? He like trying to bring back that Mao era essence, that Mao era vibe. You know what I mean? And I believe he gets caught up in corruption himself and taken down. But he was like a challenger to the current Xi Jinping regime, right? We could be living in a world with him leading China rather than Xi Jinping. Think about how different that would be, right? So this guy ended up becoming very powerful in China, and there's more that I would like to say about him, but I thought that was cool. I think it's interesting how in Russia there are these people that have been very anti-Putin for some time for various reasons, and here we see these young men who call themselves national Bolsheviks as if they're like they're Nazi communist and stuff like that, which is very interesting, a very weird ideology to take, especially when you consider that Nazi Germany slaughtered millions of Russians. You know what I mean? I could never, wave a flag of somebody who killed millions of my people, but I digress. Very interesting now how those same people with that same type of temperament, maybe not those guys, but those extreme nationalists are now super pro-Putin, right? If you think about it, what these Nazi communists were saying, the National Bolshevists, they were saying that Putin needs to go because he's essentially sold the country out. He's allowed it to become corrupt to the core and taken over by billionaires and oligarchs and stuff like that. But Putin, like many other right-wing leaders, did the old switcheroo and said, your problem is not the billionaires that are robbing Russia blind. Your problem are not the millionaires and billionaires that make it harder for you every single day to feed yourself with the money that you make from work. The problem is immigrants. The problem is gays. The problem is somehow blacks, even though there are 0 black people in Russia. The problem is somehow NATO. The problem is somehow a foreign country that's our enemy, America. The problem is always somebody else, except the rich people in our country who price gouge and extract wealth from the poor through blood sucking, right? It's always somebody else, okay? Shout out to Tim Griffiths. Shout out to Tim Griffiths. He said, we didn't learn the correct lessons from Jurassic Park. That's a very good point. Shout out to the Chinese person up in the chat saying China. Yes, we love China and we love Mao. We love Mao. So we love Mao here. We love Mao on this channel. And Shout out to the Mooper27. My problem is that I ate a whole chicken a month ago, but still haven't been able to poop out the bones. You people are disgusting. You people are the worst. You people should not be allowed to have internet access. The worst thing that ever happened to humanity were people like Mooper27 getting internet access. Since then, we've been on a downward trend. There's been no good and no progress that's come because of the internet. We will be much better had it been shut off completely. We do not want the internet anymore. Okay. Shout out to Griffiths, everybody else in the chat. Shout out to Slim Chris up in the chat as well. Shout out to everybody up in the live stream. It's crazy y'all are joining now when we were just about to shut it off. We were just about to shut the live stream off, then all y'all joined. Interesting. Sharing laughs is a positive thing, says Mooper27. I agree. I love to laugh. I love to laugh every time I look at a picture. Every time I look at a picture of Mooper27, I have a big hearty har. It's crazy. I've been on live for about an hour, and now y'all want to join in the conversation. I really don't have much to say. I do think we will take that hour break. There's no way I can keep going like this. I think we're about to cut it short. It's so crazy y'all joined right now when we're about to cut it off. But we'll watch the next hour of this documentary, possibly tomorrow. We're going to finish this documentary possibly tomorrow. Mooper27 says, do you like Pokemon cards? And I'm going to say, not since 5th grade. Not since 5th grade. Maybe even earlier than that. I was always a Pokemon video game player. And I'm old enough to play red, blue, and green. Yes, red, blue, and green. I played all three. The original. And we always start, some people like to start with Charizard. I always started with Bulbasaur. Bulbasaur is the best. Shout out to Bulbasaur. Anyway, Mooper27 said, what brand is your microwave? It's the brand where you can cook crack in it. It's the type where you can hit it with the fork, skirt, after putting it on high for 5 minutes. Then you hit it with the fork, skirt, and you got your cook up. Okay. Mooper says he had a Game Boy with Pokemon Yellow. Oh, Mooper27 is a G. Let me stop playing. He had the one with Pikachu walking behind him. He had the one where Pikachu was smelling Ash's butt cheeks for all 27 hours that you played the game until you beat the Elite Four. The Elite Six? What was it? The Elite Seven? I forgot the name. Anyway, Mooper27 is a G. He said he was a G. Okay? Slim Chris said, you could tell Bulbasaur was your favorite by your head. Well, you know what else is also just like my head? It's my dick head. My dick head looks just like my head, and your mother loves to lick all around it. Look around all parts of my head, Slim Chris. Slim Chris, your mama licks the tip of my dick like it is apple skin. She licks the tip of my dick like it is apple skin, and then chews away at the top softly and gently with tight nibbles. Slim Chris, she nibbles on the tip of my dick with her soft, delicate teeth, and then I ram big black cock into the back of her throat, viciously and vigorously, throat fucking her out of existence until the tears well up in her eyes as she looks up and says, please no, big man, dingo man. And I continue to grab the back of her throat and force feed her cock. I force feed her cock. Okay? All right? So, she'd have a job. She's Ash. Slim Chris, your mother is dead, and we are glad she is dead. I'm glad she is dead. We're glad that we throat fucked that bitch out of existence. We're glad that she is now ash that we can readily roll up in our cigarettes and smoke on. We go up in the ashtray and smoke on Slim Chris's mother's dead ashes, and my big bald head is shining through the sunroof of a beautiful Mercedes as I roll through a glorious city with high rises and towers and glistening buildings, reminiscing on the time that Slim Chris's mother was my number one cocksucker, but now I have Slim Chris's daughter. His supple 18-year-old daughter, nibbling on the top of my dickhead the same way her grandmother used to do. And now everything has come full circle, and we are back to square one. Anyway, I'm done. We're going to be coming back maybe tomorrow for the next live stream. Okay. I will catch y'all next time. Y'all be easy out there, and peace.